Hello everybody. Uh, this is part 3 of our series discussing Minolta model cameras, their issues, problems, some scenarios as far as repairability of each problem. So we are going to be covering 2 more models in today's video. Starting with a Minolta XE7. Okay, so this is it's a heavy duty camera, electronic camera. Okay, it does not work without a battery unless you're operating in the X or a B mode. So I call these cameras electronic cameras. Okay, there's very little mechanical involvement here aside from your typical shutter and winding, but it does come with an array of possible issues that the customer or a user or owner of the camera can be exposed to. All right, so let's go ahead and start with some of the obvious culprits. Okay, and this has nothing to do with an actual mechanical or electronic problem, but rather than more of an annoyance. Okay, these cameras are prone to developing desilvering deterioration problem. Okay, so when you look through the viewfinder, you see a wide, I'd say about 4 mm wide horizontal black line going left to right. Okay, that's a very common occurrence in the XC series. Okay, the reason being is because Minolta used a cushion, an inside cushion on the prism to support the prism during, I guess, for certain purposes. I'm not even sure what it's doing there, but I guess it's just for extra support. So over time, this cushion deteriorates and eats into the coating of the prism, causing the desilvering. And that desilvering basically is what you're seeing inside the viewfinder. I'm not sure if you can see it here. I'm gonna go ahead and this actually does have that problem. So this is more of a nuisance and annoyance. It shouldn't render your operation at all, okay? But again, you don't want to see that through the viewfinder every time you grab your camera. It's really annoying. So the only option that you have is basically replacing that prism. That is the only thing that you can do with a prism that hasn't been tampered with or hasn't been exposed to the same problem. And this is, in today's day and age, it's nearly impossible. We currently do not have any replacement prisms for this model. And if a customer has a camera like that we are servicing with this damage, we have 2 choices. We'll let them know that, listen, we do not have the prism, but we can work around that issue and fix everything else. If they're okay with it, we'll work around everything else and then leave the prism alone. If they're not, we're gonna pack it and send it back to them. So that is the most obvious issue. The next problem a lot of times that you will see is this issue right here. And actually my camera is exhibiting the same exact problem. You see how it's freely floating from on to off. Okay, it shouldn't be doing that. That tells me that this particular level has broken plastic pins. It's not able to switch from off to on. So whatever the last position you had the camera in before the tabs on this plastic lever broke, that's the position this camera will remain on, unless you disassemble it and manually force the metal lever inside the camera to set to the off position. So the only proper remedy is to replace this lever. Now we do have quite a few of these levers in stock from the old purchases and some spare cameras. So if you have a camera with this issue and that bothers you, if it's an on position permanently, it releases, it works, it's good. If it's an off position, then yes, it would be a problem. You can always send it to us and we can go ahead and replace it. So that would be a common issue number 2. Okay. Another big issue, okay, and now it relates more to the operation of the camera, is the light meter. So you look through the viewfinder, you see a light meter needle, and it's needle-based meter, okay, and it's stuck on the top, and as you move the aperture, okay, or the ASA dial here, there is little to no response from the light meter. It's barely moving. It's not following your aperture ring. It's supposed to follow and drop down slowly, okay? And if it's not doing that, it's a problem, because once you mount the lens, it will not read the lights correctly, okay, ambient lights correctly. So there is a problem. Now the problem in majority of cases, and I would say about 99% of the time, has nothing to do with the light meter itself, but rather requires serious cleaning of the sensor. Okay, there's a sensor below this ASA dial, which basically requires us to remove this top portion aside, get to the sensor and properly clean it from both sides. There's a top portion of the sensor and the bottom portion of the sensor. If that sensor oxidizes, it basically, the contacts that are moving alongside that sensor is not really making any contact over the sensor, basically, okay, and hence your meter doesn't see any change in conditions. So again, it's a very common issue, and when we do our overhaul or service of the cameras of this particular models, it's part of what we do. It's a standard, whether you are, our customer is reporting this as a complaint or not, we will address this one way or another, okay? But in any case, if you see that, that's a problem and it needs to be addressed. Otherwise, again, your camera will release, it will hold the speeds, but it will not read the right light meter correctly. All right, so moving on to the next problem, and this problem will be more of a mechanical, okay? So a lot of times you will notice that you wind the lever, okay, and it takes an extra effort or force, if you will, before this lever releases itself and activates or actuates the shutter, and then you can release it. So this is a problem, okay, and this problem has to do with stopper lever that's inside here, okay. So basically what we're gonna have to do is dismount this portion, remove the cover, and lubricate the stopper. The stopper is sticky, basically, in layman's terms. It needs to be lubricated, and then this problem will resolve itself. Okay, it's a very common issue, by the way, and when we do our services, we will take care of that issue as part of our CLA for this model. All right. Moving on to the next culprit. Sometimes here, this is a battery check. You will activate the lever, and there is a little red light that's supposed to light up. Let's say everything on the camera works perfectly fine, but when you do a battery check where the red LED needs to light up, it doesn't light up, okay? Again, it's not a big deal. Most likely there's a bulb, okay? And it's not an LED bulb, it's an actual bulb that either gets, the glass on it gets broken, or just burns up, just like any old bulb would burn up. Okay, now if in that particular time I have a replacement bulb, I can replace it, but the only remedy is just to replace the bulb. But again, it affects nothing except for just giving you a status of the battery. Okay, if it bothers you, it can be addressed if parts are available. If it doesn't render your operation in any other way. Okay, now and down to the last case that I wanted to discuss, or possible scenario, if you will, is you input the battery here. Okay, here's the battery cover. We'll remove it. So you put the fresh battery, okay, you place it in there, the camera is dead, nothing works on it, no battery check, no release. Okay, there could be a very simple explanation to that, and that's the battery cap itself. So again, this is something that you can do and check really quickly. For whatever reason, these particular caps are susceptible to corrosion, a significant corrosion from the battery, from other elements too. You can see there's even corrosion here on the outside. So all you have to do is, again, we use a special eraser to clean the corroded areas. But if you don't have it, I mean, use like a normal eraser, school eraser, or if you have any alcohol, isopropyl, use a Q-tip, dunk it in isopropyl, and just completely, wipe this area as much as possible. And if you have a multimeter, you can then place the battery and measure it on top and the bottom to see if you're getting 3 volts. If you still do not get the 3 volts, then you have to remove the battery and clean the surface with more substance. Okay, meaning use perhaps sandpaper. Okay, a little bit here is not gonna damage anything on it. It's just a metal surface, but the sandpaper will allow you to basically get rid of everything, all the significant corrosion that may have accumulated here. But in any case, once the battery issue is resolved, you put it back in place, you do a battery check. If the light comes back, you should be good to go. All right, so that is our Minolta XE series. And now the only one remaining on our list here is gonna be a Minolta XG camera. Here, I'll go ahead and remove the cap. So Minolta XG, now there is multiple different XG series: XG1, XG9, XG7, I believe, and XGA, and an M. Now M is a completely different beast. Okay, it's designed differently. The circuit board is completely different. Now XG9, XG1, XG7 use exact same platform and design, and the circuit board is pretty much identical. So let's go ahead and quickly touch base with the XG series and discuss some of the issues. The main issue that I'm noticing, it's actually a really good camera. It does have similar problems with oxidations, the same as when we discussed the XC series. So you'll see a light meter jumping top to bottom, up and down. It's very inconsistent, and it doesn't hold your speeds too. That's another thing. The reason being is because this dial here that controls shutter speed now uses a similar material, okay, that oxidizes. On the XC series, the shutter speed dial does not use this oxidized material component that could cause the problem. So that's not a problem here, but it could be a problem here, and in most cases it is a problem here. So what's going to have to happen is, what we do is remove the top cover, remove this section, then we'll remove the internal dial with all the sub dials and components and fully clean that surface. Sometimes there's so much dirt and corrosion, it's amazing that the camera is actually doing anything. So what we'll do, we'll clean that surface as much as possible. Use the isopropyl alcohol and just clean the surface after that. Put everything back in place and everything should work just fine. And then we'll have to repeat the process here, removing this lens mount, taking out the aperture ring and cleaning that surface where this aperture ring moves left and right on. Okay, this will resolve the issue with inconsistent light metering reading. Okay, that is pretty much the only thing that I can think of, the most obvious thing that could go wrong with this camera. And pretty much all the issues that stem from it basically is what we've discussed. Inconsistent shutter speeds. Auto function obviously wouldn't work right because it's fully dependent on the light meter readings. If it goes higher than what it's set to, your auto will not release. If your light meter arrow pointing up, the auto setting will not allow you to release. That's a thing, okay? And when your light metering is off due to the fact that the oxidation issue, your auto function is basically disabled. Another thing that you could see or find with these cameras, a lot of times, this selector dial, self-timer on, off, and BC could be loose or completely broken. The reason being is because there's a plastic mount where this dial sits on and gets screwed on, and if that mount is broken, it's plastic, you know, if let's say the camera is dropped on this side or mishandled, or you use too much force when rewinding the film, it could cause that problem. So in this case, the only thing we can do is replace it. There's no way to fix it because it's a high tension area and it will require a new component, proper component to be placed there. Okay, so that's another thing. As far as the shutters are pretty good here. I don't see any issues with shutter mechanism. It uses a similar shutter to what X700 uses, but it's an earlier generation. But the concept is exactly the same. It's pretty robust, even though it's plastic. All right, so now I want to quickly touch base on the Minolta XGM. It's still an XG series, but I don't have one in front of me. But XGM, in addition to what we've talked about previously for the XG9, XG1 series, on top of that, XGM also has issues with capacitors. Now, this unit, XG9, does use a capacitor, and that's the blue ceramic capacitor. But XGM series, they use the aluminum capacitors, the ones that do leak. Okay, so that's a problem, and I've shown on some of my videos before how to replace capacitors and clean the plates on the Minolta XGM model. So you can refer to those videos if you're interested. But that would be another problem if you are working with or if you have a Minolta XGM to look for. Okay, so chances are that both the top capacitors, and there are actually two capacitors on Minolta XGM up top. One is a 33 microfarad, another one is 22 microfarad, and another one here would be 150 microfarad. Okay, so all three need to be replaced, and all three need to be soldered, replaced, and the plates cleaned. Okay, in order for the camera to function. You'll notice that XGM basically will not release at all will not operate, period. It may show signs of life, like it's getting power, but beyond that, nothing will work on it. So that's pretty much the only difference I can remember here from the top of my head between the XG1 and say XGM. And XGA as an alpha XGA is pretty much the same as XG1, but in a case or in a body structure of an XGM, it looks very similar to XGM, but it carries the same options and features as an XG1 series. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Gave you a little bit to think on when choosing your camera. Me personally, again, don't go by what I say in terms of preferences. I think about the camera from the perspective of a repair rather than usability. I have my favorites, but you'll have to decide what you want to get, and if and when you get it, at least you'll have some knowledge of what you could expect when it comes to repairs. All right, thank you for watching.